Welcome to the Dennis Report. I'm Dennis Atchison. Have you ever wondered how to do your backyard garden as a raised bed? Or how to turn your backyard into a food supply for your household? Have you ever wondered how to get off the grid a little bit so that you can generate some of your own energy? Well, we'll touch on some of those topics with today's guest. And at the same time, we'll also learn about a New Brunswick gem, a world leader in sustainable, environmentally friendly living. Marc Gionet is the Executive Director of the Falls Brook Centre. He will fill us in on what that is and the many things it does, but he comes to that position by way of working at the Human Rights Centre.
The Atlantic Human Rights Centre.
Atlantic Human Rights Centre, which was based in St. Thomas University. And Marc has been the Executive Director at Falls Brook for the past year and a half, and he's with us here today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
So Falls Brook Centre, why don't you give us a quick introduction to that place?
Sure. So we're a Canadian nonprofit which is based in rural New Brunswick, and our focus is primarily on sustainable community development, and that means both at home and abroad. We have a number of international projects as well.
So why the middle of New Brunswick? And a lot of people in Canada aren't too sure where New Brunswick is, never mind, you know, the middle of New Brunswick.
Rural New Brunswick, yeah. Well, we're located in Glassville, on West Glassville Road, which is just 12 kilometers away from Florenceville. In terms of how we ended up in Carleton County, that's a very long history. The organization is over 20 years old, and the roots go back to the original executive director, who is Jean Arnold, and the organization was originally founded actually on her property, and has since that time grown beyond that space and variety in terms of what the organization actually looks to accomplish.
New Brunswick is a fun place because we have many gems. We have lots of geographic gems, lots of tourism gems, and people don't know they're there. I've always thought of Falls Brook Centre as one of those gems because you have a reputation on the international stage and on the national stage, but on the provincial stage, we're not quite as aware of all the great things that you do. So can you walk us through a little bit of what happens there?
Certainly. Firstly, I would agree. I think that it's quite unique to have a nonprofit operating in rural New Brunswick, let alone operating on the international stage in a number of different countries over the years. I think we've carried out programming in over 10 countries, primarily in Latin America. So what we look to do is, and actually this came into sharp focus when I came on in October 2013. I did a bit of a review of the organization. It represented a point of transition just in terms of the organization's life cycle, because I was taking over for the founding executive director, and that represented a significant change. And we also took the opportunity as an organization to purchase new property. As I had mentioned previously, it was actually developed on the founding ED's property, so that infrastructure wasn't available to the organization. And we thought, you know, we have the mindset, we have the resources, we might as well purchase an asset for the organization to develop in a very intentional way. So beginning in October 2013, we did this comprehensive review of what Falls Brook Centre is and what it looks to do. So that materialized in the form of a strategic plan for the organization, a business plan, and since we inherited this new site, a site design plan as well. So through the strategic planning, we really narrowed our focus as an organization to 4 programmatic areas. So we're interested in local foods, renewable energy, biodiversity, and thriving communities. Now, if you're familiar with the history of Falls Brook Centre, one of the principal attractions is that it's very much a demonstration and education center. It's a place where you can go and visit and see what perhaps is only conceptual materialized into the tangible. So each of these programming outcomes very much alive on our site.
Yep.
So intersplicing those four programmatic areas is the omnipresence of education, accessible, scalable education. Everything that we undertake has a pedagogical aspect to it, which is really the essence of Falls Brook Centre. We look to teach these skills and concepts and ideas to whatever targeted audience. And then the next theme, which is intersplicing, is our work in selected international communities. We very much believe that if we have a solution or an approach or a strategy which is applicable at home, then we have an obligation to share that with our southern partners, as well as ensuring that we're participating in a south to north knowledge transfer. There's a lot of innovative ideas which are coming from the south, and we'd be remiss if we didn't take advantage of the opportunity to explore those, as much as to share our own ideas.
So it's a mouthful.
It is,
right?
yeah.
Because I asked a really broad question, and
Sure.
here comes the bigger vision.
Yeah.
So we'll mine it down a little bit on a specific, and I'll help with our question on that. But
Certainly.
fascinating how hard it is to convey, or how challenging, a simple idea, which is living in better relationship with each other in the land.
Yeah.
And there's this place up there that, between the lines, what you said was almost, we don't just talk it, we actually do it.
Yeah, we got to walk the walk.
Because of that hands-on element to it. So before the show, we were talking about the anticipating the number of school children that would come.
Sure.
You've bought this new location, and how do you accommodate all those children coming through the farm? Could you tell that story about what you did on waste management, basically?
Yeah, so each spring we partner with Ducks Unlimited to carry out a program called Project Webfoot. And it's
everybody get a little webfoot now.
Yeah, well, they get an experience. So the program focuses on teaching wetlands values to grade 4 students, both French and English. And our first spring on site, we were anticipating, and we accommodated about 600 school kids flowing through the property, visiting the wetlands that we have on our new site, and taking in about a half day of programming. Not 600 all at once. It was spread out over about a month and a half. But that represented a bit of a demand on our infrastructure, and primarily our sanitation infrastructure. We had just purchased this new property. It has a beautiful farmhouse on it. But the septic system is in no way conditioned to accommodate 600 visits in such a condensed time. So it became clear that we had to meet this challenge. And just moving to the property, perhaps it would have been easy to simply, rent a couple of porta potties and, put them up for the time being or whatever else. But very much keeping with the ethics and the values of Falls Brook Centre, we had to devise a more holistic project, which really touches base on everything that we're looking to demonstrate to the public, even when they're visiting the washroom, and do this before all these kids arrived. So we did some consultation and narrowed down our decisions and came up with the idea of a compostable toilet system. So it was a very unique build. We had to make sure that it conformed to all the building standards, all the sanitation standards, that it was accessible for the general public as well as being wheelchair accessible, and incorporated all of our different programmatic aspects. So this meant explaining what the system does in relation to the compost, which is developed called humanure, and how that's
Humanure?
Yeah, how that's managed within the system, to biodiversity in terms of segregating the gray and the black water from the compost, and how that's filtered through a process called phytoremediation, to the renewable energy infrastructure, which we integrated into the structure, solar panels to power the lights and all the rest of it. And of course, making sure that all of these components are effectively communicated to the public when they're, making a visit for however long.
Yeah.
So that education component. So it was a really interesting initial build for us, and I think quite successful in terms of establishing the tone of how we're looking to develop this property and the infrastructure which will populate it.
Yeah, especially in terms of management of water, which is as the world's population doubles and we have more stress on water systems, the humans' ability to manage the water that they currently have more effectively would be one of the lessons for the young people. Although a funny image did cross my mind. I could picture a little one or an adult sitting in the washroom watching a video explaining what's happening while they're sitting in the washroom. This is what's happening here, and then we separate it there, and then we recycle it here. And so that would be one piece of what Falls Brook does, is give you the experience of a new technology or a complete cycle of something.
Sure.
So that they can be more aware of it, and that would be what they take home with them.
Yeah,
that
and
experience.
The idea in terms of these projects is that we ensure that what they represent is something which is scalable. Okay. So the idea that, if you come, you visit, the first hurdle to get across is like, I don't want to go to an outhouse.
Yeah.
Outhouses tend to be pretty gross.
Yeah.
So ensuring that when a visitor is using our facilities, that they're visiting a place which is aesthetically pleasing, that isn't off-putting in any way. So there has to be that level of functionality to it, so that these types of solutions can be looked at as a real alternative to the porta potty or whatever else.
Yeah.
And in terms of being scalable, taking a look at a system such as that and saying, you know what, maybe this is a good idea to implement for me in my hunting camp or my cottage or whatever else. It doesn't have to be a building with a wheelchair accessible side and then another side or two facility. You can abbreviate that as much as you can scale it up as well.
So that would tie to one of Falls Brook's objectives, which is a perception shift or an awareness shift, that we have technology. It's just about finding the right scale and then applying it.
Absolutely.
Because we could be using those washrooms in public parks in different places.
Yeah.
Sounded expensive when you described it, and maybe the prototype is. But could you get into, I want to shift completely into a household. So in a typical household, there's a fair amount of good water used for things it doesn't need to be used for. Do you have any comparative? So Falls Brook has this waste management facility that is much more attentive to the full cycle of water. And then here's a typical suburban household.
Yeah.
And its volume of water it goes through, and how we can do much more respect to water. And International Water Day was just last Sunday, but I'm sure most households don't recognize how much water they actually use that they don't need to be using.
Yeah, well, if we want to stay with the toilet example, essentially, within Canada we use potable water within our toilet systems. And in the Zero Waste project, which we have a clip of, which will actually show a visual representation of it, there's no need to flush. So that's
a T-shirt with no need to flush.
No need to flush. So that's an incredible savings in terms of potable water.
Okay, well, why don't you do a quick intro for the video clip, and this would be a good place to insert it.
Sure. So this was done in conjunction with the building project. So you've got a good representation of time-lapse footage of when the structure actually went up, as well as we took the opportunity to use the building project to introduce our staff to the public and explain, just as I did, a little about the intersections of just a composting toilet system and all the different programmatic areas which we offer.
Great. So we'll take a look at the clip now.
Hi, I'm Marc Gionet, Executive Director of Falls Brook Centre, and I'm here in our beautiful new location in Glassville, New Brunswick. Over the next few minutes, I'd like to introduce you to the organization, one of our first infrastructure builds, as well as some of our amazing staff. Falls Brook Centre has a long and distinguished history as a leading education and demonstration centre that inspires people to work together using environmentally sound practices to create thriving communities. We do this by focusing on 4 program areas: local food, renewable energy, biodiversity, and thriving communities. While we are rurally based, our work has relevance for people living in both rural and urban settings.
Hello, I'm Jed Frazier from Sackville, New Brunswick. I work for a local building company called Energreen Builders Co-op. Our company has 10 member owners. 3 Energreen builders are here at Falls Brook Centre to construct a composting toilet building from locally sourced lumber. Chris Murray, one of our co-op members, owns a managed woodlot where he practices silviculture techniques. The lumber used for this project is spruce and habitat. Habitat is being used for decking and posts because of its durability and it's resistant to water. The lumber used for this project is dimensional lumber, so a 2x4 is an actual 2-inch by 4-inch piece of lumber. For this build, we have far exceeded National Building Code requirements.
I am Rosamond. We're breaking ground. It's our first day of building and our very first building on site. So the aim is for the site to reflect and reinforce the values of Falls Brook Centre. And that means that anything we build, even toilets, should showcase the best practices for sustainability for the area. Ultimately, we hope to design and build up the site to demonstrate the renewable energies expertise, the natural and low impact building methods, and the land stewardship skills that we have, so that other folks can see how they might incorporate those processes on their own properties. And of course, we hope to keep in line with the natural beauty of our new site and the sense of wonder that Falls Brook Centre has always inspired.
Hi, my name's Scott Robinson and I'm the Education Coordinator here at Falls Brook Centre. It's my job to design and maintain the educational programming that corresponds with our 4 areas of focus: biodiversity, local foods, thriving communities, and renewable energy. I also make sure that our workshops and presentations have the most recent information available and continue to line up with the curriculum outcomes offered at local schools. With the new site, there are an unlimited number of possibilities for us to explore. A huge area of interest from both visitors and staff are the composting toilets. We plan on having a lot of people through the property for field trips, workshops, and other special events. It's only natural the bathrooms will see a lot of use, so we've decided to turn them into something educational. Whether it's learning about the composting process, how the lighting and fans work inside, or the selection of plants in the area to absorb any toxins, it's a great opportunity to learn something new. This is just one of the many things going on at Falls Brook Centre over the next year.
My name's Tim Amby and I'm the Renewable Energy Project Coordinator for Falls Brook Centre.
Renewable energy is one of Falls Brook Centre's program areas. As such, we aim to have sustainable energy options for all of our on-site buildings. This new building is an opportunity to not only install a lighting system that is powered by solar energy, but also to demonstrate how renewable technology can be adopted by anyone. Falls Brook Centre will be installing the solar PV system at a workshop where participants will learn the theory behind renewable energy installations and then gain hands-on experience of actually doing an install. The install will feature solar PV panels, batteries, and a charge controller.
Hi, I'm Natalie Nadeau. My area of focus is restoring the natural environment of the site. At this time, I'm focusing primarily on the restoration of the wetland. A wetland offers a really exciting learning opportunity. They're nature's filter, preventing pollutants and chemicals from running directly into rivers untreated. The still waters of wetlands allow pollutants to settle slowly to the bottom and gives them the time needed to be decomposed. We try to match this natural type of storage and decomposition with other aspects on site. One example is our new composting toilet system. This system collects and stores human waste, allowing it to be decomposed by bacteria and filtered naturally by the wetland.
Hi, I'm Emily. When composting waste into humanure, it is important to add only biodegradable materials. Never put synthetic chemicals or oil-based products in the toilet. Separate liquid and solid wastes. Make sure the compost reaches minimum temperatures between 100 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 to 7 days. And ensure a balance of 1 part nitrogen to around 25 parts carbon-rich materials. Because our waste is very high in nitrogen, we will add a good amount of wood shavings or straw after each deposit we make. Once composting is complete, the product will be a relatively dry, odorless, and highly nutrient-rich humus. In our certified organic system, humanure is not permitted as a fertilizer, especially in places where it could come in contact with food crops. Instead, it can be spread around the bases of trees in wooded areas, far enough away from gardens so that there is no potential for contamination.
FBC envisions local communities working together to create and celebrate a world with strong relationships, a healthy natural environment, and vibrant local economies. We look forward to working with you to make this all happen.
Great, so that video clip was much fun, and we know a little bit more about what Falls Brook Centre does. But in some ways, people still need it to be a bit clearer. So that's the waste management thing. How about living, you had 4 pillars that you spoke about?
Certainly. So renewable energy, biodiversity, local food, and thriving communities.
So let's slide into the food one then. So you guys must be busy. Those are broad topic areas.
They are. Now within our strategic plan, that's that's the priority outcome, and we have specific outcomes associated with each of those programmatic areas. So in terms of local foods, it's increasing the availability and production of local food, for example. So working in a number of different ways towards issues such as food sovereignty and helping to educate the public in terms of healthy food eating habits and cultivation. So lots of work, but again, the site serves as a principal demonstration towards this. We've run an organic certified community agriculture garden for a number of years, and that's continued on our new site as well. We've gone through the organic certification process. Excuse me.
You guys must be connected with ACORN as well, the Atlantic
That's right.
Canadian Organic Regional Network.
Yep.
So are you a teaching center as well, or more demonstration center? So you come up for a weekend workshop, or can you do sessions that last longer than that?
Yeah, so that's definitely been a strong component of the deliverables we look to offer to the general public. And whether that's through certification courses or smaller, afternoon workshops. One around local foods, which we offered last year, for example, was raised bed gardening. So again, trying to draw in as much from our peripheral programming to complement what we're doing around local foods. So in terms of a raised bed garden, it's a bit of infrastructure. It's some lumber which is required to manufacture the raised bed, and we sourced that through a local woodlot owner and had it milled just down the street from us at a local mill, and then put together essentially a product where people would be able to come, take the workshop, understand how to garden within a raised bed, which is a bit less labor intensive than having to till, and also offers increased accessibility so that you're not down on your hands and knees, as well as demonstrating some positive practices within the forestry sector and value adding to the products, the raw products, which we're looking to use through local contacts.
the typical person who would take the workshop all ages?
Yeah, it's a good variety. I mean, we'd have everyone from young families who are looking to teach their children, the value of small scale gardening to old tried hands within our own immediate community who are there to just see what our tactics and approaches are to gardening and offer their suggestions and relay their expertise that they've accumulated through years of practice. So in terms of what we look to offer for education, it really is, internally anyway, we say cradle to grave, right? We want to offer the full spectrum.
Yep. My first touch with Falls Brook Centre and even hearing about it was some time ago now, and because I had a fantasy of building a straw bale house.
Right.
So I would have been able to go up and take a workshop and then start to figure out how I could bring that home and start to build my own.
Yeah.
Is that the gist of the program side of Falls Brook? That people can come and learn, and then they take it home with them. And what happens afterward?
Yeah.
So there's people that take your organic raised bed gardening thing. Do you have any way of following up with them afterward? How they're doing? Is that the measure? Or is the measure simply enough that they've come and they've got an interest and you've given them some skills to take home?
We like to organize our programming around essentially a series of opportunities for continuity and for continuance. So with raised beds, that's kind of in the middle. So you could start in the spring with how to essentially, start your seeds and do a seed exchange and learn about, how or the benefits of starting your seeds early indoors and then moving them out outside. So you could take that in the spring, then there's establishing your raised bed, and then perhaps another one tending, and then harvesting.
So we're pretty specific on one of the many tentacles of the thing. But also tied to that, though, what connected for me just now, there's more and more people paying attention to trying to raise more of their own food. It'll be exciting one day when we start to see gardens, vegetable gardens in the front yard of houses. That sort of culture shift. That would tie to Falls Brook being part of the resource as well as the vision for how to go about doing this. There'll be all kinds of municipal bylaws and neighbors to deal with, but it'd be interesting to drive down the street and see a couple of rows of corn and some squash and some beans on the front yard. But that gets into, though, food security, the ability of a household to be a little more autonomous, the ability to weather some bad storms, because we have ability to be self-sufficient to a degree. So your organization is a challenge because it does so much. It's hard to narrow it down to a specific. I didn't want it to get caught on just compostable toilets or organic farming in your backyard on raised beds.
I think those are good examples, and you're raising some interesting issues which, as an organization, we've had to confront as well. The first being, I described our property as being situated in rural New Brunswick, and then the example for urban agriculture, which you provided, dealt with gardening in municipalities. Something which is incredibly important to Falls Brook Centre is ensuring that the solutions and strategies which we're offering and trying to call from the community itself are applicable not only to rural New Brunswickers but also to urban New Brunswickers. The idea that if we're going to have any degree of success in meeting the challenges of climate change or food sovereignty and food security, then we have to be adaptable in terms of the strategies we employ. And if we decide to only focus on a portion of the population, be it rural or urban, we're missing a large component. That's a very interesting example which you've given, and in fact that seems to be almost the next iteration in terms of where the food movement is going. You've seen Fredericton's a good example in terms of a large successful community garden, and in the infrastructure which is required to have that function properly. But there's a capacity cap to that type of model. So it's, how are we able to complement that? What other strategies are we able to employ? And how are we able to use land which is really not being utilized to its full capacity currently. So yeah, it's a concept which was recently introduced to me called spin farming, and it's very similar to what you described in terms of using residential front yard lawns as under an acre plot, micro plots for urban farming. So that's something that we're investigating a way to get involved with and see if we can get a pilot project off the ground.
So many topics, so many directions. We're going to take a brief pause, and we've got some things to show you, and we will be back in just a minute.
Mile marker, count 'em off, son. Between what once was and what's begun.
Thank you for coming back. We're here with Marc Gionet, who's the Executive Director of the Falls Brook Centre. And our conversation, as expected, is wandering in 1,000 directions at once, and that's the pleasure of it, actually. So, if we continue to follow the themes about a human footprint and how we organize ourselves, whether it's rural or urban, how do we manage better our water, our food? I think of power as well, and electricity. And a personal pet peeve is when flying into Toronto and you're looking at all those flat roofs on top. Montreal will be the same way, but Toronto sticks out. And no solar panels, nothing green, no roof gardens. There's a major culture shift that needs to happen. Even smaller places like New Brunswick could start to adapt those principles. So do you have some themes or topics on around renewable energy?
Yeah, and this is an area which is generating a lot of attention, both in the not-for-profit sector as well as the for-profit sector and government. It's something which is, it's incredibly topical, and there's lots of opportunity. So we've been in the renewable energy game for quite some time. So it's refreshing to see this rejuvenation and the possibilities which have come along with it. A good partnership which I was quickly able to cultivate between Falls Brook Centre and the for-profit sector was through Bullfrog, which is a company based in Toronto that has the mandate of augmenting the green input into the Canadian power grid. And they do this through a number of different means, and then they offer the possibility for their consumer base to purchase their power consumption from a green source, despite your actual geographic location. It's a bit of a conceptual product, but it's very interesting, and the amount of success that they've had has allowed them to invest in community energy projects as well. So last year we partnered with Bullfrog, and they provided the critical financing for us to install a 3 kilowatt photovoltaic solar panel system on our office building, and that's outfitted with 8 kilowatt converter and a 9 kilowatt battery bank. So going back to the idea of serving as an education and demonstration center, this is again being able to represent the value of renewable energy and the real effect that it could have on a residential house or a small business, for example. That partnership is also with MB Power. So we're not off grid, we're tied into the grid and have an agreement with MB Power in terms of how the energy which we produce through our solar system is integrated into the grid and meets the objectives of Bullfrog, as well as being an additional source of green energy to try to augment that equation of either renewable or non-renewable energy sources within the larger Canadian grid.
Yeah, and giving yourself some autonomy as well, because you're generating your own power.
Yeah, very much so. In fact, when Arthur rolled through, our office was at a power for 6 days. and we didn't realize it until the lights started to do a couple funny things, and then we went down and investigated, and it turns out we were running off of our battery bank for about 6 days. And it was only when the battery bank was in fact drained and we got some overcasts and the energy, the immediate energy which was being generated through the solar panels was insufficient to meet what we were actually we were using. So yeah, we went down, and then there's a fancy digital display, and you can go through your event history and realize that yes, about 6 days ago the main power kicked off, and we've been running our solar system exclusively for that long.
As you describe this stuff, I have some friends who are engineers in the MB Power world, and they'd be chirping big time about constant demand and trying to generate supply, and the storage challenge of batteries and new technology for batteries, and the mix of wind and air and water sources. And of course they're like, it's all the wrong scale, and you can't sustain the supply necessary to meet the demand of all the households and stuff. But I keep thinking, if more houses or neighborhoods put up a windmill that helped 10,000 homes in an area, or 5,000 homes, that autonomy's got to be a driving emotion or a passion that creates a cohesion within the community, just to want to have to be off the grid a little bit, or to have the autonomy to be self-sufficient a little bit. And the technology sounds like it's getting closer and closer to where the battery power is feasible and not at an exorbitant cost.
Well, I'll be incredibly forthcoming with the financial details of that project specifically. It was in the area of about $30,000 in total to do that work. And again, it's not to suggest that this is the unique kind of scale or application for everyone, but it's a good representation of what is possible.
And you can go and see it in action and learn.
Sure.
And then find out how to adapt it.
Yeah, and in conjunction with that installation, which we unveiled during one of our large public events annually, it was Free School, and we had the folks from Bullfrog come and do the unveiling, and we had about 300 people in attendance for that, which was great. That summer we also did a workshop specifically on photovoltaic solar systems, and the idea was to again offer this scale of possibilities. So utilize the infrastructure which was installed on our office building, and then also have the alternative end of the scale represented as well. So the workshop was essentially a theory on what solar systems are, the physics behind it and all that fun stuff, and then a costing exercise. So if you have a house and you would like to do this, then how much of the energy demand within your home would you be looking to meet through your renewable energy system? Or if you're looking to implement this on a cottage or a hunting camp or something along those lines. The costing exercise, so that people got a good understanding of the feasibility of this type of investment. And then the last portion was actually the install. So I talked about the composting toilet system previously. Our workshop did the install for that composting toilet. So very much everything from the theory to the hands-on application, so you get an understanding. But in terms of the general system and the agreement that we have with MB Power, I'd like to say that MB Power has been very supportive of this type of initiative, and I think they realize, and in fact have set hard targets of how much they would like renewable energies to make up their overall power generation capacity. So this isn't something which is going away. They recognize that this is a strong component within their tool belt, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a build on this in the very near future.
Great. One more touch on some Falls Brook stuff, and then I'd like to slide in a new direction. But earlier you had mentioned that you've got some drone video footage of the place, and I think our audience would love to watch that. So could you do some talk over top while we edit in what the video footage looks like for about a minute, minute and a half?
Certainly. So you can just let me know when I've run the course.
Yeah.
So as part of the strategic planning and site design, we wanted to collect footage of the property when we had essentially just taken it over. And we had the opportunity, we're also rebuilding our website. So possibly by the time this goes to air, our website will be up, which would be great. And you'll be able to see the full video on the website. But for a comparative, to watch the story of Falls Brook Centre and how we developed the property over the years. So I think we're very fortunate. So as the footage will show, this is a fairly typical parcel of land within New Brunswick. It's reclaimed farmland. Essentially, it's 95 acres, and it includes a wetlands area, which has since been developed by Ducks Unlimited. They provided about $30,000 of in-kind labor and expertise to build up that area so that it's going to function as a wetlands much better. It includes a range of Acadian forest, which has all the indicator species. It includes the Shiktahawk stream, which cuts through the back third of the property, which is a designated Atlantic salmon habitat area. It includes a red pine stand, which is also very typical, and I mean a pine stand in terms of a plantation stand where it was planted a number of years ago by a previous owner. And of course, it also includes the former farmland. So it's a very accurate representation of New Brunswick in terms of the geography and the environmental factors that we're living with. And it's a great opportunity for Falls Brook Centre to utilize that property to highlight the benefits of each of those areas. That includes the wetlands education to protected habitat to Acadian forest, which is in decline, to what to do with a red pine stand or a plantation in terms of alternatives to simply chopping it down and harvesting the wood. So it's a great opportunity, and on top of that, it's remarkably beautiful. It's a very special place. You find yourself in the area. There's a certain real draw to want to spend time there and be outdoors and enjoy the scenery.
Feeds your soul.
Very much.
There's a lot of places around New Brunswick that feed the soul. We just don't often speak of them that way, and yet we sure feel it when we're there. That's great. I'd like to slide into a slightly different direction, go international now on what Falls Brook does. We have about 10 minutes left, so if you could take 5 and talk about the great work done in Honduras.
Sure. So, Falls Brook Centre has been very active within the international community. We've been involved historically for a long time with the Atlantic Council of International Cooperations, which is an umbrella organization for nonprofits within the Atlantic region working internationally. I currently serve on the board of the ACIC and continued involvement in that way. And currently we have a number of projects running in Honduras. Actually wrapping up this month will be our large project, which has been done in conjunction or funding through the federal government. So previously CETA, the Canadian International Development Agency, and currently now DFAT, Department of Foreign Affairs Trade.
Almost sounds like a hip-hop rap artist.
That's right.
DFAT.
Yeah, that's right. So this was a 4-year program where we were working with 3 specific Honduran partner organizations to implement food security, micro enterprise incubation, reforestation, and public education around environmental issues along the northern coast of Honduras. And this really focused around communities which had been impacted by deforestation of mangroves. So rebuilding that natural barrier between the sea and communities which have been eroded, and the north coast of Honduras has been particularly susceptible to inclimatic weather. Rebuilding that natural infrastructure has been of the utmost importance, as well as some ways for communities to utilize that asset in terms of ecotourism. So it's been a very successful project. It's been very intensive, and now we're shifting focus a bit. We're currently in negotiations with a couple stakeholders to implement a water project in a number of these same communities where water is just a big issue. Access to water, clean water, quality of water, affordability of water, all these things. So in response to what the community has told us, shifting from one project to the next, they've identified water as a concern. And still, we've managed to include a public education aspect to all of this. So partnering again with the ACIC, we'll be running a program this July, and it's open to youth from across the Atlantic provinces to do, it's called a Global Youth Leadership Tour, where Falls Brook Centre organizes this tour for youth leaders who have an interest in international development to come visit our projects and work with our partners and see the collaborative approach, which is incredibly necessary to generate any degree of success for these projects, as opposed to, bringing a group of people down to do a specific one-off and then going back home. There's an incredible amount of work which is done pre-departure for the youth, as well as follow-up once they return, so that they can properly communicate their experience and relate it to their own ambitions as they move forward. So that's a very quick kind of overview of what we do internationally. We're a big provider essentially of experiential education opportunities abroad, and we're looking to continue in a strong way in that vein.
We need to work towards wrapping up. I'd like to shift it towards you a little bit,
Sure.
if that's all right. You kind of represent a demographic of people that the older types will say, we got to retain our young people and have their vitality and their energy, be excited and alive and working in New Brunswick. You're here and you're happy to be working here. It's obvious. It's a passion. So what would you offer as a suggestion or a direction for the powers that be, or for households or communities in relation to your work at Falls Brook, to what you think New Brunswick needs to do to map itself out for the next 20, 30 years? In 2-3 minutes.
There's not a tall order at all. Well, I think since you turned the focus towards me, I can perhaps phrase this within my own personal experience. I see an emerging trend in terms of conversation around the need to retain our youth, that everyone's leaving. And I don't see that as a problem. I think the trick of it is ensuring that we have a place to live and work, which is enticing enough to bring people back. I wouldn't have the skill set, I wouldn't have the experience, and I wouldn't be able to contribute in the way that I'm contributing unless I had lived in Uruguay and lived and studied in Argentina and lived and studied in Ireland before coming back here. And I think that needs to be just a slightly more nuanced narrative around the value of not necessarily immediately retaining all the young minds and energy which seem to be escaping the province, but ensuring that we've developed the groundwork for a really attractive place to return. And I think part of that is ensuring that there's real options for people to come home too. A lot of people are leaving just out of necessity because whether it's now or in 10 years, they don't have the same options. And that's unfortunate, and that's something that we desperately need to address.
So, but it's almost like there's a bridge with make New Brunswick an attractive place to come live, and there's Falls Brook with its knowledge base and its experience base with that same mandate about how to make New Brunswick a better place to live.
I'm happy to champion Falls Brook Centre as an alternative to that narrative, because we've been very successful in terms of retaining people within the province and striking this balance between work, which has a great sense of meaning, as well as attracting people from out west to come east, which is the complete opposite of what we've. Yeah, and not only doing this within Fredericton, Moncton, or St. John, but within rural New Brunswick.
Yep.
So the value of being able to draw people to a rural New Brunswick, where there's obviously an internal migration as well from the rural parts of the provinces to the urban.
So if we took some of Falls Brook's methodology and philosophy and applied it to St. John or Moncton, what could those communities be doing?
Oh my goodness.
Water is a big issue for both of them. That's why I kind of picked on it, whether it's the infrastructure that's underneath or the demand on the water system.
Well, I'll say this.
For instance, go where you want to go.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting trend which is already happening, and the advice that I could give is ensuring that these trends are generating the amount of exposure which they should be entitled to, because they represent something which is very much in line with what Falls Brook Centre has offered as well, and this is that blend between satisfaction at work and essentially lifestyle and standard of living. Had the opportunity to attend East Coast Startup Week and some of the events which were organized by Ponde Centre, and hear about some really interesting social innovators who are doing tremendous work to create that community, which is very much enticing for people to come home to and be a part of. So I would say if there's a lesson in any of this, it's to reverse our own internal narrative around New Brunswick as almost a failed province, and instead look to what we're doing remarkably well and how we can replicate that and upscale it.
Great. Any last thoughts as we wrap up?
No, I'm just very happy to have the opportunity to talk about Falls Brook Centre. It's incredible how quickly the time went by. I don't think we touched on nearly enough. So I'd encourage your audience to get in touch with us and come take in some of our programming if they have the opportunity.
And as always, when we post the show up on YouTube, there's links that we put in the copy section of the YouTube video. So
great.
We might find you that way.
Perfect.
Thank you for coming. And as always, thank you for watching. Be good, have fun, and love each other.